Shalom and welcome back. This week's Perashat Beshalah is sponsored for Refuah Shlema for Chana Bat Sima Fega. She should have a complete Refuah Shlema. We should only hear great things from her and the family. Pasha is a very interesting one. It's super deep. We are getting into the stuff that makes up Passover. This story is a story of legends. This story is a story of miracles. If finally Paro, his will is broken, and the Torah tells us that he sends the Jewish people. Ve'ihi Beshalach Paro et ha'am v'lo nacham Elokim derech eretz Plishtim. Interestingly, it came to pass where the Pharaoh lets the Jewish people out. And the question is, well, why Paro? What does the Pharaoh have to do with all this? Didn't everyone just learn that God used his magical powers, so to speak, to release the Jewish people? The world just witnessed 10 of the most miraculous events that ever took place. This massive, most powerful economic, social, nation of Egypt that had, connections to all around the world, witnessed something that forever changed their psyche and their being. And now Paro is the one that's letting out the Jewish people. And then the Torah tells us that, God, takes out the Jewish people, but not in a typical way, right? God did not lead them by the way of the land. Lo nacham elokim derech eretz Plishtim ki karovu. Right? It was too close. But God says, Ki amar Elokim pen yinachem ha'am beroatam milchama v'shavu mitzrayma. We're afraid, God says, that the people are going to reconsider. They're going to see war and they're going to go back to Egypt. What does he do? V'yisav Elokim et ha'am derech hamidbar. God takes them in this circuitous route through the desert and the Yam Suf, the Red Sea. V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. But the Jewish people, they went out armed. Now, how does this make any sense? Okay, number one is Paro, really, he's letting the Jewish people out. Number two is God has engineered this so that the Jewish people are leaving Egypt, freeing the slaves, and he can't take them directly out of Egypt because they're going to be afraid. They're going to see war and they're going to turn around and go back to Egypt. Really? Would you want to go back to the prisoner? You want to go back to the captors? You want to go back to the guy that's been brutalizing you? The people that have been destroying your children and offspring? You want to go back there? Why would that happen? So obviously God understands the psyche of men. And I think that's why the parasha begins with this. Vayhi Beshalach Paro et ha'am. Who are we talking about over here? Is this God telling us that Paro left? Or maybe the Torah is telling us that this is what the people were thinking. Oh, it was God, it was Paro that let us out. They were so broken and twisted, this people, okay? Because Egypt was not an easy slavery. It was not an easy exile. It broke them psychologically, mentally. And they, after witnessing everything at this point, with their freedom, this final sigh of relief, they're ready to go out. And who let them out? Their master, Paro, let them out. So these people are still very fragile. They're still very weak psychologically. And they're so fragile that you'd think that this moment of emancipation, of freedom, would be something that they would celebrate of. No, throughout the parasha itself, we keep hearing this idea that the Jewish people are saying, oh, why, Moshe, did you bring us out of Egypt to die in the desert? We're better off to go back to the prisons that we came from in Egypt than to have the freedom to choose our own lives. This is a powerful idea, right? We are, as people, would much rather take the easiest route. Many years ago, for many years, I actually taught in seminary, and these are a girls' school. These were post-high school girls. Some of them went to prestigious Orthodox schools, where they got very deep Jewish training. And I found over the years that very few of them were able to articulate, what being Jewish actually is. Sometimes it just becomes the thing that we do over and over again. It becomes the menial tasks that we do. I wash my hands, I make a blessing, I eat, I make a blessing, I make an after blessing, I say Shema when I go to sleep, but no one's really thinking about what they're doing. And this is a problem. This is antithetical to Judaism. Judaism is interested in people being the masters of their faith. Their fate. We want you to take control over your lives. We want you to have ownership over the world you're living in. I don't want you to submit yourself to something else, not even to rote. I want you to be thinking every moment. That's what it means to be alive. To be living means I am making choices. And every one of us, by the way, are guilty of wanting to live in a life where I make no choices. Too many options on the menu in the restaurant. I'm overwhelmed. Hey, waiter, what's good on the menu? I don't want, you tell me what to order. I don't want to make the choice, right? And so now the Jewish people are on this destination, they're traveling, and the Jewish people are leaving, and they see Paro as the one that's leading them out. And that's why Parashat begins, Veyihi, right? Veyihi is the word that you use to describe something that is bad. It's negative. Veyihi Beshalach Paro. It's negative because the Jewish people don't see the hand of God yet. Even with everything they experienced, it's only later on by Kriyat Yam Suf, where the Jewish people see the most wondrous of all miracles, the splitting of the sea, that they say, oh, there's God. But here, no. So God takes them in this circuitous route because the journey itself is meant to teach them something profound. It's meant to teach them lessons along the way, right? So what do they do? The Parashat tells us that v'yisav Elokim et ha'am derech hamidbar yamsuf v'chamushim alu Yisrael. The Jewish people were armed, right? This word chamushim is interesting because chamushim means armed, but it also, Rashi tells us something else. He says the word chamushim has to do with a fifth. And he tells us that a fifth of the Jewish people were destroyed in Makot Bachorot, Makot Choshech, the plague of darkness, and most of the Jews didn't make it out. So only a fifth, 1/5 of the Jews made it out. And therefore, when we're talking about the freedom of the Jewish people, okay, there was a huge amount of psychological loss over here. Chamushim, what were they armed with? They were armed with the children that they adopted from all those parents that died. Chachamim tell us. They were also armed with chamushim. What were they chamushim with? V'yikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo. They were armed with mitzvot. The only way to take a people that were broken, brutalized, tortured, broken, is by giving them the power of taking ownership of their story. How do I do that? Do a mitzvah. Do something positive. You're feeling depressed, you're unhappy, you're broken, stop wallowing in the sadness. Go and do something positive. It's antithetical to the way you feel, I know. I'm not up to it, Rabbi. No. The opposite. You want to get out of your depression, you want to stop feeling the way you feel, be involved in doing something positive. This, right over here, my friends, is the recipe to taking a person out of Egypt, out of their Mitzrayim, out of their own misery, out of their exile, out of their brokenness, and it's teaching us how to repair somebody. So let's do a mitzvah, mitzvah. Let's arm them with something that no one wants to do. Let's give them the ability of doing something positive to the point where the person that they're doing it for can't even repay them. That kind of mitzvah. Okay. So they finally are let out, and we know the whole entire Pesach story, that the Jewish people are finally freed. Okay, and we know that at the end of the Parsha, I'm going to skip around a little bit over here, Mechila, at the 7th Aliyah, V'yisuet kol adap b'nei Yisrael midbar Sin. The entire community of the Jewish children of Israel, they traveled to this place called the desert of Sin. Okay, Lama'aseh, all right, Al Pi Hashem, they traveled based on God's directive. V'yachanu b'refidim, and they rested in Refidim. V'en mayim lishtot ha'am, and the people have no water. How is this possible? God is the ultimate, travel agent, so to speak. And he was able to turn water into blood and back. He was able to transform reality into something completely different. He couldn't figure out and didn't realize that the itinerary required water. I do lots of trips. Water is like essential on all my trips, right? So God couldn't figure out that you needed water. What happens? They started arguing and quarreling with Moshe. They fight, give us water. Why did you take us out of Egypt, our children and our livestock, to die of thirst? Moshe el Hashem le'mor ma aseh la'am hazeh. He starts crying out, what should I do for these people? Right? Od ma'at usklani. If a little bit longer, they're going to stone me. These people were ravenously, they were thirsty. They just wanted something. Moshe, God says to him, don't worry about it, right? Kach itcha miziknei Yisrael matecha asher hikiti bo et hayar kach miyadecha halachta. This is at the end. Take out your hand, your staff, struck the Nile, and go and bring out water. Right? This is the second time the Jewish people are complaining about water. Right? Why didn't God just give them water? He wants to show them something powerful, right? He wants to teach them a lesson. That in life, sometimes you got to go ahead and pray. Sometimes you got to have faith. Sometimes you got to go do something. This is different than when the Jewish people are standing at the Yam Suf, the beach of the Yam Suf, and they're crying out to God, please save us. The Egyptians are coming out to destroy us. This is different than that. God says, don't pray. Go, visa, go do something. Over here, this is different. The Jewish people complain about water earlier also. Moshe takes a tree and puts it into the bitter waters. He changes it for them. Why is God doing this? He wants them to have a relationship with Him. So often in life, in our own journey, in our destinations, and our arrivals, we go, we come, we go, we come. We don't really look out the window and ask, why am I going through this? Why are we doing this? All of us wants to take a route that is somewhat meaningful. We want a scenic route. We want to experience something that's beautiful. But rarely do we stop and ask, why am I going through this particular place? What am I supposed to learn from this particular area in my life? What am I supposed to walk away with from this experience? And the whole entire parasha is God creating experiences along this journey for the Jewish people to do one thing and one thing alone. Are you ready, able, willing to ask for help? Stop being an ebed, stop being a slave, and waiting for yourself to respond to the circumstance. When are you going to be proactively thinking about how you could do things for yourself? Sometimes the way you break in a person that's broken is by creating a scenario where they're able to ask for help. Hey, God, help me over here. Even Moshe is overwhelmed by their request. He doesn't even know what to do. And as a result of this, now what's interesting is that the next thing that happens is Vayavo Amalek. Amalek comes along and attacks the Jewish people in a place called Refidim. And now these are slaves. They can't deal with this. God doesn't know that Amalek is going to attack. Of course He does. Part of their therapy, part of their rehabilitation is for the Jewish people to actually go to war and win. Lots of casualties, lots of losses. Most of this generation doesn't make it, by the way. Their children make it. Joshua finds the courage to take the Jewish people in and do something that is impossible, taking a whole generation of children that were born in a miraculous reality into a world of the mundane, letting them conquer different kings. There are 31 kings in Canaan. They have to go through that. These people that come out of Egypt, they can't do this. But the process of building a nation is the process of allowing them to have their experiences, to give them ownership of their own reality, so they can go ahead and become something more. It's Beshalach. What parts of yourselves are you willing to send away, so that you can express the best parts of who you are? All of us have something that we need to get rid of, but the way in which we get rid of them is by looking at the scenarios that we're in, rising to the occasion, using our time to be the best of ourselves. Don't settle. Don't allow yourself to get by leaning on your natural talents. Choose to outgrow your Mitzrayim. You'll see every moment, Beshalach Paro, someone else sent this out. Oh, this happened because of that guy. But that's not what the Parasha is teaching us. Parasha is teaching us, my friends, that everything that happens in our world is happening because of the big guy in the sky. He loves you infinitely. He wants you to be happy. He wants you to choose greatness. Make the choice. Don't be a slave. Don't give in to your scenario. You can rise above it. You have the power of splitting oceans. You have the power of defeating undefeatable armies. You got to remember where everything comes from, my friend. God is waiting for you. Ask for the help, and you shall receive. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom Mevarach. Looking forward to continuing the conversation, God willing, next week. Shabbat Shalom.